I've been keeping track of how much I'm just surprised because research says it took 6 to 10 weeks to actually
Really?
yeah. I know, that's the same time I was trying to figure out. I know if it was dying or going to start sleeping. I can have you just like how to so that you can use them. Whereas, well, they're not to my best. And then so, but I didn't go for it. And I was like, okay, so they're like alive. Yeah. They're not dying. They're useless. But I gotta wait 6 to 10 weeks. Well, when I researched it, they have alternatives that they tunnel through the muscle and prevent the part. Yeah. And it's important that's the passive vitamins we make so like I'm not sure that's why I was nervous.
What's that? Not disgruntled audience, man. You know? They shouldn't be disgruntled and stuff. This is
You're over here for the entry.
You didn't, we didn't disapprove any bars. That would be that. You may have. Oh, Jimmy, I'm sitting next to you. Marissa coming down this way too? All right.
Okay, if we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, call the meeting to order for City of Plattsburgh Planning Board. This would be the February 26th meeting. We do not have a formal agenda tonight, but we do have a couple items of consideration. I guess I'd like to thank those of you from the student community for coming out to the meeting. Meeting minutes for this month will be held off until next month for review and consideration from last month's meeting.
Okay.
Okay. The one, well, I guess for all of our audience members, maybe we can give some introductions today.
Adam Frazier, worked for the City of Plattsburgh upstairs, run kind of support for planning board from an engineering perspective.
And my name is Bill Ferris. I'm a local business owner, and I've been on the planning board for 7 years now, working on year number 8. And basically, the planning board, what we do is we advise and help applicants move their plans forward to build in the proper manner in the City of Plattsburgh.
Jim Abdella, I'm chairman of the planning board. I've been on the planning board around 7 or 8 years as well. Also a local business owner. looking to support the community as a volunteer member in its overall planning.
Marissa Gilbert. I think I've been on the board about 1.5 years, and I was on the city zoning board for 20 years before that. I think I'd bring a different perspective because part of our job is historic site review, and I'm very, very involved with the local historical association, and so we are charged with also looking at changes to buildings that are in either historic districts or a historic site themselves.
So you know me, I'm Kurt. I've been on the planning board for about 4 years, and welcome to you all. This is SUNY Plattsburgh's environmental planning class for this semester. So we have students that are majoring in environmental science and planning and management, and then we also have several students that are majoring in different facets of SUNY Plattsburgh's education program that are in this class as well. And every student here is working in a group developing a plan for some aspect of the city as well. So they're also trying to implement a planning process through this class.
Okay, no. I'm the planning board secretary. I'm Jody Helka. Nice to meet you guys. Welcome.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
No problem. Well, like I said, we don't necessarily have a as formal an agenda tonight. We do have one item that's just sort of a continuation item from definitely the previous meeting, but it's actually been a request since December timeframe. Ultimately, it's for an environmental review for the county. They have a proposed project out on the airport for a new hotel restaurant site development. And we have a request that's been on the table now for about a month or so to designate them as a lead agency for environmental review purposes. The planning board did consider this last month at the regular January board meeting and ended up requesting additional time to review and consider the request. Reasoning being that we were asking for additional information from the county to support the request. At this time, in our pre-meeting, we reviewed some additional information and a adjustment or change in the request, which is what we'll be looking at to consider a response tonight. You know, back in our January review, we were looking at an overall full site development with hotel, restaurant, all the associated amenities. At this time, we've received an adjusted request for a scaled down project, which would involve just the parking lot and the roadway. The county's looking at a unlisted action, which would require which would not require a coordinated review, which would therefore also alleviate the need for request of lead agency status. They are asking, however, that the planning board and a couple of the other city agencies to look at approval or concurrence with segmentation of the environmental review for this action.
Yeah, and as provided to us, segmentation is in general not a very good thing. They don't want you for secret review to start breaking a project into pieces and parts to make it go more smoothly, or so that you don't actually look at the impact of the entire project on the area. So that's why we're a little bit concerned. We don't think that we really want to give them a written confirmation from the city that the city, us, or at least our board agrees to segmentation on the project, and that the county would be lead agency to proceed. So as you've said, there would be no lead agency if it is a project that doesn't require it. So, and they also have not yet provided us with really any drawings or information or anything on the parking lot or the road that they're asking us to look at and say that we don't need to comment on. So we think we need to ask them for more information, again, which we've actually already done in earlier emails and have not gotten an answer.
So you're getting a lot of terms and vocabulary words tossed out and acronyms that you might not be familiar with. And I don't want to take time to make all of them clear tonight because everybody here has other things that they, families and things that they want to go home to, right? But the couple that we should mention are SEEKR is an acronym for State Environmental Quality Review. Those of you that have taken law and policy, we've talked about NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. SEEKR is a state environmental quality review that requires that everybody who's proposing a development in the city look at the impact on air, land, water, and energy. And by segmenting the project, we only look at the SEEKR for a small piece instead of the project at large, which is why we want to prevent segmentation, right? We should look at projects on their whole impact, not just little pieces, because in aggregate, they have bigger impacts than little slices. But we don't have enough information to know why they want to segment and only build the road and the parking lot now and then build the hotel, restaurant later. Is that fair, Adam?
Pretty close, yeah.
Okay. Why is this, I'm not familiar with unlisted action. Why is this an unlisted, what is an unlisted action and why is this unlisted?
Can you answer that?
I'm not fully a SEEKR expert yet, but I believe there are 3 types of actions, type 1, 2, and unlisted. But
And really, all unlisted means is an action that isn't listed on list number 1 or list number 2
Pretty much,
to
yeah.
trigger an automatic type of review.
as to which ones are which, I'd have to go back and look. I'm
Okay.
not there yet.
Ultimately, if you look, SEEKR is the process itself is a well-documented review process. You look up SEEKR, S-E-Q-R, online, and the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation in New York will have a full outline on the process, the regulations. As Adam indicated, there is a type 1 and a type 2 action. Type 1 actions are an automatic coordinated review, and it outlines specifically what those actions are and what the thresholds are to fall there.
Okay.
If you don't fall in that type 1 action, a type 2 action are typically actions that automatically don't require SEEKR review.
Okay.
They're more ministerial actions, and they're another list. If you don't fall in one of those 2 lists, then you fall in unlisted.
And then you're just in this gray, like nobody knows what to do with
Well,
it.
you're in a gray area that a board can make a decision and
Okay.
say, this unlisted action, we think has enough attributes that are similar to type 1 that it ought to be looked at and it ought to be a coordinated review.
You could make it a coordinated review,
Yeah.
it could be an uncoordinated review. In SEEKR, you have what's called a short form, which is an abbreviated form that an applicant might fill out. It's only a couple pages. They also have a long form, which is 10, 12 pages that they might, with a lot more information. If you're an unlisted action, you could fall into either of those depending on what the lead agency determines.
Yep.
Or gives direction on. So in this case, once again, I think are looking at, we started off with one project, a full project. Now our request is changing to a piece of the
Started off with hotel, restaurant, parking lot, access road.
full project request.
Yeah.
Now we're adjusting down to a piece of the project, which, once again, we're being asked to.
So I'll read out, I'm just going to read out,
Yeah.
this is the original request to us dated December 19th. The proposed action has the following objectives. Construction of an approximate 80 to 120 room hotel and the associated parking. Construction of a 7,200 square foot full-service restaurant and its associated parking. Construction of an access road connecting New York State Route 22, also known as Craig Boulevard, to the hotel and the restaurant. Rehabilitation of an existing parking lot for long-term parking for hotel airport users. Construction of a pedestrian walkway from the airport long-term parking lot and hotel to access the airport terminal. Removal of portions of the existing LeMay Drive and former PAFB alert facility access road, and installation of utility and stormwater management facilities. So that was the original big request. And they're cutting that down, and again, they have not sent us a second letter with many fewer objectives on it to say, no, this is our revised request. So we think we're gonna ask them to withdraw this request altogether, so it just becomes a non-request. It's been removed. That would be step one, perhaps. And then our next action might be no action at all. I think we're a little bit hesitant to issue any kind of a letter that says, yeah, it's perfectly fine to segment things, because it really isn't. Or at least we don't want to put in writing from our board that it is perfectly fine without having seen anything. That becomes our problem tonight.
They never gave us any type of drawings or anything for a complete project.
Or even just the parking lot and the road.
Right.
Actually, that was part of our original response in the January board meeting, was that
Not enough
in order to
information.
support that request, we were looking for
In order
additional
to seed
information.
something, you have to actually look at what you're willing to not deal with.
Yeah. So, at this point, I would tend to agree that it would be appropriate to probably
Ask for a withdrawal of this request?
withdrawal of that request, or.
Yes.
And then, if we were to consider any further, the request for segmentation in any manner, there are some limited reasonings for segmentation, but for the most part, they require a lot of additional information, a lot of supporting information to justify the request. So at a minimum, if we were to if the county was in need to have our concurrence on this, we need additional
Yes.
information.
Yes, so two-step letter, do you want to write that, one letter, two letters, where we approve you to write that letter
I think one
for us?
letter is fine. It's
Yeah.
probably reasonable.
Probably one.
Yeah.
Ask for them to rescind the request of December 19th. Rescinding that request, and at that time, you may submit a new request. And that puts the ball in their court to determine whether or not it's an unlisted action.
And we just say,
Requires
in that new request, you should have sufficient information that we could agree to segmentation,
Or to
because we can't agree without more information.
or sufficient information to make a determination
Yeah.
on the new request.
Yes.
Whether it's
Yes.
segmentation or lead agency on
Right.
another,
Right.
type of project.
Well, I'd be willing to make a motion to that effect, that we're gonna authorize you to sign a letter to that effect that is the feeling of the entire board.
Okay.
Who's gonna second that?
I don't know,
I'll second that.
There you go.
okay?
Okay.
Discussion?
Any other discussion?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carried.
Okay, so write a letter.
Thank you. Okay,
We didn't, just to be clear, we didn't include anything about whether or not we are seating lead agency. Because we don't know what this is gonna look like.
In
so.
the previous letter, we stated we cannot at this time consent to lead agency as new information was presented yesterday.
And they need this signed,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
they're not getting
And
that.
they're not getting that.
They're not getting this form,
Yep.
no seating going on.
I mean, they could possibly be wanting the parking lot and the road, just to say, look what we got for you. Are you willing to come here now? Because we haven't seen any plans, and maybe nothing's nailed down yet. So they might want something just to
They make it
entice
sound from the
people.
money argument that
Right.
it's gonna happen and we need to proceed on this funding schedule or it's all gonna collapse, so. The other thing that's an issue here is, this is a county parcel that lies within the city limits. So if the county were doing something,
So basically, it's a
That
city
didn't-
property that's owned by the county.
right, and if the county were not involving some developer who's not a tax exempt entity, not the county, not a municipality, if that were not involved at all, they wouldn't even be talking to us, because they're exempt, right? They're exempt from review, they could just go do what they want, They could put a pig
Originally-
farm there, whatever.
Originally, the Department of State was going to be issuing the building permit for the hotel and restaurant, And at that point, it would have been their review, their show. But since the DOS is no longer issuing a building permit, it falls to us to regulate, permit, and inspect. So it must conform to our procedure.
Okay, we're good.
Very
Anything
good.
else?
No.
What wasn't discussed in the pre-meeting was the eventuality of forming a committee to overhaul zoning.
Yes, that is one other item that we had
Well,
thought
since
about
we're now down
discussing.
to 5 people, I mean, couldn't it just be a committee of the whole? It's not like we're 7 bodies.
That's-
Don't think,
Does it-
maybe I was wrong. I believe the committee was intended to be possibly city staff, 1 or 2 maybe from the board, some
Yeah.
public involvement. We were anticipating on looking at a grant for possibly master planning, citywide land use plan, and based on that, update zoning, or if we go the ad hoc method of this worked elsewhere, it could work for us and save money that way. So we're still forming the basis of the committee and how it's going to happen, what's going to change, when it's going to change, and how it's going to change.
I think
But
it's
nothing's happened
probably
yet.
appropriate to ask for some direction from city council in terms of makeup of the committee, how many, in terms of formalization of meeting rules and those type of things. Whether that includes the whole board on the committee or it ends up a select number, we'll see.
I'd want to know the objectives. Can we get some specifics on what this committee is supposed to do?
Big part, big picture is overhaul zoning for issues, discrepancies, outdated, our stormwater policy, sidewalk policies. Zoning Board of Appeals has their own laundry list of updates they'd like to see. The sidewalk one's a big one. Technically, right now, it's within the planning board's purview to assign when sidewalks are to happen. The question is, what about new developments that are built out beyond the subdivision level? When and where do sidewalks get placed?
With the change in departments, there is a lot of clarity to be offered in our zoning ordinance. Everything from, where does the building inspector's authority start and begin and end? And begin is a good question because, if you look at our zoning ordinance right now, the building inspector is really the person that drives even review of our applications initially before they come to us, but that's not necessarily how it occurs. So we have different things. And when you get into our subdivision ordinance, although I think the terms have changed via local law in terms of city engineer throughout, but there's still a lot of references to city engineer in our subdivision ordinance that isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
So
In my experience, typically when it's requested to form a committee to take on a pretty big charge like that, there's a resolution from the council. They say, whereas we're forming a committee to do these things, that resolution hasn't happened.
We're not even there yet.
no.
Okay.
Yeah, this is still planning, start thinking about what you'd like to see, and we're gonna start the legwork to form the committee, everything that goes into that.
So are we in a position to make any kind of, as the council moves forward with this decision, here are some things that we suggest?
Eventually, I think it'll get there, but I don't think we're there yet. I'm sure there'll be public hearings, public involvement, requests from the committee to various boards saying, give us your ideas, what would you like us to incorporate? It's still very not there yet.
Well, then maybe this isn't maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse, but I would say so maybe it's not appropriate to make a suggestion right now, but I would say if there's a committee if there's going to be a resolution or something at some point that creates a committee to do this work, I would suggest at least one SUNY Plattsburgh student and a high school student. If we're creating a master plan for the city that's looking out 20 years or 30 years or something, right? The chances that, 30 years, we should all be there still, right? Hopefully, fingers crossed. But, right, if we're doing planning, the people who are going to be here in 20 years or 30 years should be a part of that. So I'd say it needs public involvement. It need on the committee, not just in the hearing, and it should have at least one SUNY Plattsburgh student, a high school student, maybe a middle school student.
I think the question is going to come down to what, once again, what is the goal of this update? Is it an update of zoning, the zoning and subdivision ordinances, or is it a complete update of the city's master plan?
Right.
But again, really, ideally, state law wants you to have a master plan. When you make any changes to the zoning, they want you to have it based on a master plan. And we have, the last couple times, that really hasn't happened, okay? And you can lose in court based on that. So it really would make more sense if we actually updated and adopted the master plan and then had zoning code just as a natural outflow of that. That's kind of the way it needs to happen.
And that's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
We'll see what the,
We'll see.
we can, I think that's something, once again, to consider
Yeah.
in your thoughts. Everything from what you've seen planning and zoning wise.
Yeah.
To what you think the process should be. We could probably offer a recommendation to the Common Council as a board, maybe in the next month or two.
I'm not sure what the protocol is for interrupting. Did you say the master plan hadn't been updated since 1999?
Correct.
Have we ever had a question from the audience like that?
Yeah, that's fine. We do have public question.
And the last master plan, they got a grant because we knew the base had closed in 95. And that all of that land that had been former Air Force land was going to then come under our control, where before, when it was controlled by the Air Force, it was not controlled by our zoning code. And so they knew they needed to decide how is this going to be developed. And so when you actually look at that master plan for the area of the Air Force Base, it's kind of interesting. It's like RC1, recreational commercial 1, and how it ended up being developed compared to how it was thought it would be developed is kind of interesting, because now it's mostly residential. I mean, you look around the Oval, yes, we have Oval Brewing over in the former firehouse, but there's really nothing commercial. There's no ice cream shops, gift card shops, canoe rental places. This is what they thought would happen because of the lake access. And it just turned out to be all residential. So what I can see is that changing to protect those owners that are over there, to make it recognized as being more of a residential area as opposed to a mostly commercial area that happens to have some residential in it. And maybe a different section of the area where all the museums are could still be more commercial and have, for instance, like the barracks brewing, Valker Brewing. But it's kind of funny when you look at the code, what's actually permitted. You could put a naked turtle on the Oval. I don't think anybody that lives there would be very happy, but it's a permitted use from back then. So that's why it kind of needs to be looked at.
So,
Yeah.
from the meeting tonight, I think maybe we
Good?
think about.
Oh, did we want to mention that we were willing to have a meeting in 2 weeks if they got us information?
That
You
is,
can put that in the letter.
We can put that in
Yeah,
the
we can
letter.
put that in.
Put that in the letter that we would be willing to have an extra meeting if they were willing to pay for the publication.
How much notice do they need for the publication? Week?
I don't know, it's got to run for,
Jody, do you
is it
know?
5 days?
I have to have at least 3 days notice to put it in the newspaper, and then, we have to run it for,
For the 5,
if we're gonna do a special notice,
yeah.
okay.
Or they wait an extra 2 weeks and they have it at the regular meeting?
Yeah, that's their choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's already listed, so that doesn't.
Assuming they come back not rescinding theirs and submitting a new one. If they rescind
may
it
just-
and don't submit it and treat
Then-
it as an unlisted. then-
Yep.
Nothing you can do.
Yep.
Okay.
Do we need to amend the motion that passed?
Motion that passed was kind of vague.
Okay. Great motion there, team.
The motion was write a letter.
Oh, too quick to write a letter per what we discussed. It was pretty
Fair
vague.
enough.
Pretty vague.
Well,
Okay.
if there's no other items for
Okay.
discussion,
That's it.
Did I have any other questions from the audience?
Extra credit, come on.
Yeah.
That's right.
If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
I'll third it.
Perfect.
Okay,
All in favor?
aye,
Aye.
okay.
So if anybody has questions or wants to chat about your projects, City Hall's gonna close. I could meet you outside on the front steps if you wanna chat for a few minutes.
Monopol's open.
Do you have anything due on Monday, a week from tonight? No.